let's move on to talking about a different topic now. It's sort of fallen out of the headlines recently because, blimey, we've got a lot going on, don't we? But you all remember, no doubt, the Tavistock clinic that eventually was shut down after so many scandals, whistleblowers talking about quite what was going on there. Then finally, we had the Cass report. Hilary Cass, a sort of top-notch paediatrician, writing up in detail the fact that perhaps giving hormone blockers to kids is not a good approach. This is experimental medicine, and at the very least, we need to stop and look at some of the side effects and potentially start looking at what is a mental health condition, a psychological condition, dysphoria, through the prism of psychology rather than medical and surgical intervention. Well, because of this has exploded in recent years, and Tavistock has closed, we've got 2 new specialist hubs for children in gender care, and the waiting list is astronomical. But one thing that disturbs me to my bones is the fact that there is a child under 5 on the waiting list for NHS gender care. How is that possible? How does a child under 5 even begin to have this conversation unless this is somehow being done by the parents? And I'm not going to mince my words here. If parents are encouraging or talking or affirming their child at the age of 5, that they might be born in the wrong body, I would call that child abuse. Let's talk now to Amy Gallagher, who is from the New Culture Forum. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this explosion in the waiting list first. Now, I've got my own theories on this. I spoke to an incredible American journalist called Jennifer Bilek the other day, who's followed the money when it comes to LGBTQ plus activism in America, which finds its provenance really in 2 very wealthy families who've poured a lot of their money into NGOs who then promote LGBTQ activism and really decide the narrative akin to Stonewall here in this country. And it happens that both of these families also sit on the boards of big pharmaceutical companies. And I don't believe that all of a sudden this gender activism or trans activism has come from the grassroots up. I believe very much that it's imposed from the top down. And I think one of the major vehicles of this has been social media and other elements of the media. And that children, essentially, it's become a trend that children who are disaffected, that might feel over-sexualised because we live in a highly pornified society as well, are being encouraged to start finding refuge in the idea that they can change their bodies and somehow find peace and solace that way. Do you think that's a fair assessment of what is going on with these huge waiting lists? Or have there always been kids who have gender dysphoria and we just haven't spoken about it before?
No, I think that's absolutely a fair assessment. I mean, 10 years ago, the Tavistock were having about 200 to 250 referrals a year. And we know by 2022, that went up to about 5,000. And this recent report shows that there are now 5,700 waiting for so-called gender treatment. So it's just going up and up. And to me, this really shows that the social contagion element of trans is completely as strong as it ever was. I know we've had the Cass report and we've had gender critical beliefs being accepted in law, and we've had the ban on puberty blockers, but adolescents are unfortunately still on social media, as you say, and accessing ideas that tell them that the answer to all their problems is to change sex. And I think it's very concerning that we even have gender clinics, because it is giving an idea to this it's legitimising the idea that gender is the main concern, which I don't think it is.
Yeah, and let's talk about the 5,700 on waiting lists and the changes of dynamics going on here, because my understanding is about 75% of those are female, when actually historically, if one looks at the rates of gender dysphoria, and actually I think this can be seen of the sort of first-gen trans activists out there, that it's largely often a male condition, and that perhaps what is happening now is we have lots of little girls who might be suffering other neurodiverse issues, but also at the same time they are being brought up in a world where they have to be a Kardashian, that they have to have the big lips, the big boobs, hypersexualized, and they have to do that to conform. If not, they're ostracized. And even if they go down that route to conform, they then essentially have a lot of unwanted attention that they think they should want, but is extremely confusing and worrying for little girls with plastic minds. And also, frankly speaking, biologically, women and groups of women are more prone to mass hysteria. It is part of our sort of functionality where lone wolf man went out the cave and, you know, got the prey, and the women as a community worked together, that women by and large are more prone to social contagion. Is that about right as well? That, you know, particularly the most vulnerable right now when it comes to this explosion in referrals to gender clinics, it could be young girls.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that in the last 20 years, just mental health among girls just generally has really deteriorated. Suicidality has increased, self-harm has increased. The American psychologist Jonathan Haidt has done a lot of research around this and he links it to social media, that social media has absolutely been very negative for girls' mental health. But as you yourself talk about, there is a rise in sexual violence, in sexual assault, in the use of porn. So I think the world is becoming a very terrifying place for young girls, and it makes sense that they would come to the conclusion that it might be easier to be a boy, because it may well be.
But one thing that is thankfully being upheld by this government and Wes Streeting is the ongoing ban on puberty blockers, at least at the NHS level. So all of these kids on the waiting list for gender care, what sort of treatments will they be able to access?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, I do wonder what these gender clinics essentially will be offering, because the only alternative to a medical approach is talking therapy. But talking therapy is generally whether it's CBT or psychotherapy, that is the first port of call for any mental health issue. So it does worry me when these people say that they're gender experts or there's a specific gender clinic, because presumably a lot of these young girls mostly are suffering from also comorbidities such as depression, anxiety, trauma, autism. We know from the Cass report that you know, there's huge crossover with all of these things. So really they should just be accessing normal adolescent mental health treatment, which unfortunately the waiting list for such treatments is just as long as it is for these gender clinics, and that's a bigger problem as well. But yeah, I mean, this is a broader problem of mental health among girls, and you know, it worries me that we're focusing overly on this gender issue.
Yeah, I agree. Amy Gallagher, thank you ever so much. And